Hi, today I'm going to read Going Lobstering, because if you live in Maine and you ever travel, people will always be interested in hearing about the lobster in Maine. It was a beautiful day at the beach. Linda and her little brother Eric were building sandcastles and looking for seashells. When they looked out at the ocean, they saw a boat, and they wondered what the man in the boat was doing. Their father came over and told them that the boat was a lobster boat and that the man in the boat was a lobsterman. A lobsterman uses traps to catch lobsters. After hearing all about lobsters and lobstering, Linda and Eric asked their father if they could go out on a lobster boat someday. Their father decided to take them to the town pier to meet his old friend, Big Joe the lobsterman. Their father told them that if they were lucky, Big Joe would take them out lobstering to check out some of his traps. Big Joe thought that was a fun idea. The first thing Big Joe did was to show Linda and Eric the buoys that float on top of the water and mark the location of his lobster traps. Big Joe's buoy colors were green, white, and red. As they left the harbor, Eric was hoping they would catch lots of lobsters. Big Joe told Linda and Eric to be on the lookout for his buoys. Big Joe explained how a lobster trap works. The lobster is baited with stinky dead fish. Then it's set at the bottom of the ocean. There's a rope attached to the trap so it can be pulled to the surface and checked for lobsters. A buoy marks the rope that is attached to the traps. Hungry lobsters are attracted to that smelly bait. There are openings in the side of the trap so the lobsters can climb in. Once the lobsters are inside the trap, it's difficult for them to get out. Linda could not believe all the buoys she saw. Eric was amazed by all the different colors. Each lobsterman has his own colors, so he knows which buoys are his. Linda was the first to find one of Big Joe's buoys. Eric remembered that the colors they were looking for were green, white, and red. Big Joe grabbed his buoy. He put the rope through a pulley and wrapped it around the winch. He then began to pull up the first lobster trap. Linda and Eric were a little afraid. They did not know what to expect. Unfortunately, the first trap did not have any lobsters in it, but it did have a flounder. Linda and Eric thought this was a crazy lobster trap. It caught a fish instead of a lobster. Look at that big fish. That's a flounder. They pulled the second trap. It had 2 broken boards. Big Joe explained that they would have to fix the broken boards so that the lobsters could not escape through the hole. And if you ever go out lobstering now, you would be very unlikely to find a wooden lobster trap because they used to break. Now the lobster traps are made of green wire. In the third lobster trap, they caught 10 rock crabs, but still no lobsters. Big Joe put bait on the bait hook, then they threw all the crabs back in the ocean. Look at him whipping those over the side of the boat, flying through the air. In the fourth lobster trap, they finally caught 2 lobsters. One lobster was much too small, but the other one looked big enough to keep. Big Joe showed them the special gauge that a lobsterman uses to measure a lobster. A lobster is measured from its eye socket to the end of its back. The other lobster was also too small. Before throwing the lobster back in, Big Joe showed Linda and Eric how to hold the lobster. The easiest way to pick it up is by its body with one hand. Then the lobster cannot bite you with its claw or hit you with its flapping tail. In the fifth trap, they caught a very big lobster. As he picked it up, Big Joe noticed that the very big lobster had thousands of lobster eggs under its tail, right in through there. Lobsters have eggs have to be thrown back into the ocean. Splash! Linda and Eric couldn't believe it. After finally catching a lobster big enough to keep, it still had to be thrown back. But it was the best thing to do. In the oceans, the egg will hatch and thousands of baby lobsters will have a chance to grow. Linda wondered how the mother could possibly take care of so many baby lobsters. When the sixth trap was pulled from the water, Linda and Eric were scared and almost started to cry. There was a shark in the trap. It took Big Joe a long time to get the shark out of the trap. In the seventh lobster trap, they caught 2 lobsters that were big enough to keep. Now finally, they had some they could take home and show their mother. Big Joe helped Eric put rubber bands on the claws so the lobsters could not bite anyone. Lobsters have 2 claws. One is a cruncher claw that is strong and dull. The other claw is a scissor claw. It's sharp and quick. Lobsters also have 2 antennas. They have 8 legs. The first 2 legs on each side have little pinchers on them. They have tails that flap. One amazing thing about lobsters, when they lose an antenna, leg, or claw, a new one grows back. In the 8th lobster trap, they caught 22 crabs, 6 small lobsters, and 4 lobsters that were large enough to keep. Claws were snapping everywhere, and Big Joe had trouble pulling everything out without getting bit. In the 9th lobster trap, no one could believe what happened. Big Joe was stunned. He had caught a lobster this big. The lobster couldn't even get its cruncher claw into the opening of the trap. They finally got it out. Wow! It was almost as big as Eric. This lobster was probably as big as the biggest one anyone has ever caught. Linda couldn't wait to tell all her friends about the gigantic lobster. They pulled a few more traps. After they had caught 10 lobsters that were large enough to keep, they steered the boat back to the harbor. After seeing how big lobsters can grow, Linda wanted to know what they eat. Big Joe told them that lobsters are scavengers. They eat anything they can. Snails, fish, periwinkles, mussels, clams, crabs, and even other lobsters are just a few examples. Eric wanted to know if lobsters eat hamburgers, fries, and pizza. Big Joe and Linda laughed. Big Joe told them to remember that lobsters eat anything. They would even eat a pizza if they could find some. Soon they were at the entrance to the harbor. Linda told Big Joe that going lobstering was really fun. Eric agreed. They were back on the pier. Big Joe was happy because he had caught the biggest lobster he had ever seen. Linda was happy. Eric was happy. Now all of their friends wanted to go lobstering. The end.